My name is Alistair Finch, though I haven't heard it spoken without the prefix judge in what feels like a lifetime. Even now, at 61, with the gavel gathering dust in a glass box on my mantle, the title clings to me like a second skin. It's a good, solid thing. It has weight. It has meaning. My life has been a long, unblemished testament to the clarity of the law, a world of clean lines, of right and wrong, of guilt and innocence. There are no shades of gray in my world, nor should there be in anyone's. There is only the blinding white light of truth and the absolute consuming darkness of transgression. I live alone now. Martha, my wife, exists in a separate wing of the house, a satellite in a distant emotional orbit I no longer have the inclination to visit. My home is my courtroom, my world pared down to the essentials of order. The books in my library are arranged not by author or subject, but by legal precedent, a towering edifice of established fact. The forks in my cutlery drawer are aligned with surgical precision. Time's up, equidistant. Each morning, I wake at 5 without an alarm, and from the moment my feet touch the floor, I pass judgment. On the blustering politician on the morning news, his platitudes a clear contempt of reason. On the neighbor who lets his dog foul the pavement, a petty tyrant of suburban neglect. On the sloppy, unforgivable grammar in the local paper. It isn't a quirk. It is a duty, a continuation of my life's work. When you spend 40 years separating the righteous from the wicked, you don't just stop because they hand you a pension and a gold watch. You are a necessary instrument, a bulwark against the moral chaos that constantly threatens to spill into the world. I have always been that bulwark. I have always been good. But there is a name I have not spoken aloud in 30 years. A name I buried beneath a mountain of case law and 1,000 subsequent righteous convictions. Thomas Reyes. He was a simple man, a mechanic with oil-stained fingernails, and a quiet, unassuming wife who watched the entire trial with the wide, unblinking eyes of a startled doe. The evidence against him was sufficient. The prosecution, led by an ambitious young man eager to make his name, laid out a neat, tidy narrative of theft and violence. I listened, I weighed the facts as they were presented, and I delivered my judgment. It was clean. It was precise. It followed the letter of the law. I remember he just looked at me as they led him away, not with anger, not with fear, but with a kind of bewildered pity, as if I were the one who was lost. He died in prison 7 years later, a short piece on page 9 of the local Gazette next to the classifieds and an advertisement for lawn fertilizer. A heart attack, it said, an unremarkable end for an unremarkable man. I read it once, my morning coffee growing cold in my hand. Then I burned the quipping in my heavy crystal ashtray. I told myself it was closure. Justice, having run its full, deliberate course, was now complete. But the truth, a truth I have never admitted to God nor man, is that I have never been certain. A sliver of doubt, thin and sharp as a shard of glass, lodged itself in my soul that day. Was the evidence truly sufficient, or was it merely convenient? Did I see a monster in the dock, or did I just need to see one to make the world feel orderly again? That sliver of doubt became the driving force of my remaining years on the bench. I became more rigid, more unyielding in my judgments, desperate to prove through sheer force of will that the Reyes case was an anomaly, or better yet, not a mistake at all. I built a fortress of righteousness around that single buried lie. My greatest fear, the one that sometimes surfaces in the suffocating quiet of 3 a.m., isn't that I was wrong. It's that the capacity for that kind of wrongness, that casual, convenient, soul-destroying evil, was not unique to the criminals I sent away. The terror is that it was and is inside of me. that the monster I've been judging my whole life has been sleeping behind my own eyes. And lately, I think I've started to feel him wake up.
The waking began as a tremor, a fine, persistent vibration in my hands that no amount of Earl Grey tea or tightly clasped fists could still. My meticulously ordered world started to fray at the edges. I would find myself standing in the middle of my library, surrounded by the comforting scent of leather and aging paper, unable to recall which legal text I had intended to pull. The crisp lines of print on the page, once a source of ultimate clarity, would swim before my eyes, the stark black ink blurring into an accusatory gray. At night, the profound silence of the house became a presence, a weight in the air that pressed down on my chest, and in that silence I would hear the name Thomas Reyes whispered, not by a voice, but by the frantic, panicked pounding of my own heart. This wasn't just doubt anymore, it was a physical malady, a cancerous growth on my certainty. My control, the very bedrock of my existence, was fracturing. It was a former colleague, a defense attorney named Marcus Thorne, who I'd always disdained for his moral plasticity, who mentioned it. He cornered me at a local charity gala, a necessary evil for maintaining one's public standing, and commented on my haggard appearance with a familiarity I found offensive. I was complaining, uncharacteristically, about the relentless pressure of retirement, the mental fatigue. He smiled, a conspiratorial, reptilian smile. "There are things for that now, Alistair," he'd said, his voice a low murmur that barely cut through the chamber music. "Not street filth, designer compounds, for clarity, for focus." He spoke of a new synthetic drug, something obscure known only as Glimmer. He called it a cognitive key, a way to unlock absolute certainty and silence the noise of a guilty world. The very idea was repugnant, a chemical shortcut to a state of being I had earned through a lifetime of ironclad discipline. Yet, the promise of it, the silencing of that name in my heart, was a siren's song to a drowning man. I obtained it through a discreet number Thorne provided, a small crystalline tablet that seemed to absorb the light in the room. I held it on my tongue, the taste clean and sterile, like purified air. For a moment, nothing. Then the world dissolved. Not into chaos, but into the most sublime, breathtaking order I had ever witnessed. The rigid lines of my studies softened, flowing into one another like a symphony of perfect Euclidean geometry. The books on the shelves ceased to be individual volumes and became a single, unified river of knowledge. The sliver of doubt in my soul, the one I had carried for 30 years, did not just disappear. I felt it being physically extracted, a painful, exquisite release like a surgeon removing a tumor from my very being. In its place, a warmth spread through me, a profound euphoric certainty that washed away all guilt, all ambiguity. I saw the face of Thomas Reyes in my mind, and this time there was no pity in his eyes, there was only guilt, obvious, naked, and vile. I saw the truth, pure and unvarnished. My judgment had not been a mistake, it had been divine. I had been right all along. It was the most clarifying, righteous moment of my life. I awoke the next morning feeling reborn. The tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by a surgeon's steadiness. The world outside my window was sharp, the colors so vibrant they almost hurt. My mind was a placid lake of absolute truth. I felt clean. I decided to take a walk, to test this newfound peace in the flawed and messy world. In the park, I saw a young woman kneeling to give a piece of her sandwich to a homeless man. A week ago, I might have seen this as a small, if ultimately futile, act of charity. Now, I saw it for what it truly was. Her smile was a mask of condescending pride, her offering an act of public self-aggrandizement. She wasn't helping him, she was using his poverty to purchase a moment of moral superiority for all to see. The deception was so blatant, so nauseatingly clear, it made my stomach turn. I looked at the man, his face a roadmap of poor choices and weakness, and felt not pity, but disgust. He didn't need a sandwich, he needed judgment. He needed to be purged of the weakness that led him to this state. And the woman, she needed to be punished for her sanctimonious pride. My initial denial that perhaps the drug still lingered was swept away by the sheer, undeniable force of this revelation. This wasn't a hallucination. This was seeing. This was my point of no return. I knew what I had to do. That evening, after the sun had bled from the sky, I returned to the park. The community had recently installed a small bronze statue of children holding hands, a monument to unity and such sentimental nonsense. I had always found it foolish. Now I saw it as a shrine to the very weakness that was rotting society from within, a metal lie celebrating a non-existent harmony. Under the cloak of darkness, with a small crowbar from my garage, I went to work. The metal groaned under my assault, a high-pitched shriek of protest. I didn't feel like a vandal, I felt like a surgeon excising a tumor. With each screech of metal against metal, the euphoria from the night before returned, a warm tide of absolute purpose flowing through my veins. When the statue finally toppled, landing with a dull, satisfying thud on the soft grass, I felt no fear, no guilt, only a profound sense of peace. I stepped back to admire my work and caught my reflection in the polished surface of a nearby plaque. My face was illuminated by a single stark park lamp. The man staring back at me wasn't a criminal, he was righteous. His eyes weren't filled with the wildness of a monster, but with the serene, resolute calm of a saint who had finally begun his holy work.
That holy work, I now understood, had only just begun. Tearing down a bronze idol was like treating a symptom. The disease itself, the moral decay I now saw festering everywhere I looked, had a source. Its heart was the very place I had dedicated my life to, the courthouse. For 40 years I had labored under the delusion that I was serving justice within its hallowed walls. Now, with the veil lifted by Glimmer's perfect clarity, I saw it as a place of vital compromise, a theater where truth was bartered and sold, where empathy, that most dangerous and corrupting of human emotions, was allowed to cloud the clean, hard lines of judgment. The building itself was a monument to this sickness. Its stately columns and polished marble floors, a glittering facade for the filth it contained. It had to be cleansed, not with argument or reform, which were merely tools of the corrupt system, but with fire. Fire was the only truly pure element. It didn't negotiate, it didn't compromise, it didn't listen to pleas for mercy. It simply burned away the unclean, leaving behind only sterile ash. The decision felt less like a choice and more like a calling, a divine imperative. I did not rush. My actions over the next 24 hours were imbued with a profound liturgical calm.
I retrieved 2 5-gallon canisters from the garage, their red plastic a vibrant, promising color. I filled them at a deserted petrol station on the edge of town, the methodical glugging sound of the pump, a steady rhythm for my righteous purpose. As I drove through the sleeping city, the streetlights slid over the windshield like spotlights from heaven, illuminating my path. Every shadow seemed to recoil from the approach of my vehicle. The world was holding its breath, waiting for me to act. When I reached the courthouse, it loomed against the night sky, not as a bastion of law, but as a pagan temple full of whispering heresies and false idols. I parked a block away and approached on foot, the weight of the canisters in each hand a comforting, balancing force. I found a service entrance near the loading docks I knew from my years on the bench, a simple lock that gave way with a firm, practiced shove of my shoulder. Inside, the air was cold and stagnant, thick with the smell of old paper, floor wax and dust, the smell of decay. I walked the silent, cavernous halls, my footsteps echoing like the footfalls of a lone priest in a desecrated cathedral. I ran a hand along the cool marble of the walls, feeling the vibrations of 1,000 lies still trapped within the stone. I passed the records room, a library of compromises. I passed the deliberation rooms where weak-willed juries had been swayed by emotion instead of fact. I didn't feel like an intruder. I felt like I had come home to perform one final necessary duty. My old courtroom was at the end of the main hall, Chamber 4. The polished brass plaque on the door gleamed in the dim emergency lighting. I pushed the heavy oak doors open and stepped inside. It was all there, exactly as I remembered, a perfect silent diorama of my former life. The judge's bench, a throne of carved wood from which I dispensed what I thought was wisdom. The jury box, where 12 ordinary, fallible people were asked to grasp at an absolute truth they were incapable of understanding. The witness stand, a stage for performative grief, coached lies and half-truths. I saw it all now as a grotesque parody of justice. This room hadn't been a sanctuary of truth, it had been a crucible of moral corruption. It was here that the seed of doubt about Thomas Reyes was planted, not by evidence, but by the pity I saw in his eyes. Pity, empathy, weakness. It started here, it will end here tonight.
I began my work. With the grave solemnity of a sacrament, I unscrewed the cap of the first canister and anointed the room. I poured a glistening, volatile trail of petrol over the polished wood of the jury box, soaking the worn cushions of the seats where doubt had been allowed to fester. I splashed it across the prosecutors' and defenders' tables, where so many poisonous bargains had been struck in the name of expediency. I doused the witness stand, where perjury had been rewarded with sympathy. I saved the judge's bench for last, a place of ultimate sacrilege. I climbed the 3 steps and poured the remainder in a great cleansing deluge over the chair where I had sat, the gavel stand, the thick leather-bound books of law that had been so twisted and misapplied. The acrid chemical smell filled the air, sharp and clean, a holy incense for this purification ritual. As I emptied the second canister along the spectator pews where the public had watched these travesties unfold, the liquid soaked into the dark wood, reflecting the dim emergency lights in wavering, distorted lines. The room was ready for its baptism. I stood in the center of the courtroom near the witness stand and took out a simple box of wooden matches from my pocket. My hand was perfectly steady. I slid the box open and selected a single match. I struck it against the abrasive strip. The small flame flickered to life, a tiny, defiant sun in the oppressive, petrol-scented darkness. For a long moment I held it, admiring its purity, its simple, uncompromising nature. It asked for nothing. It judged everything. Then, with a gentle underhand motion, I tossed it onto the prosecutor's table. The world erupted. A deep, guttural whoosh of sound and a wave of heat slammed into me, stealing the air from my lungs and pushing me back a step. The fire did not creep, it exploded, a hungry, roaring beast instantly unleashed. It raced along the trails of petrol I had laid, a network of fiery veins, bringing the room to a terrifying, beautiful life. It engulfed the space in a tidal wave of orange and yellow light, throwing dancing, monstrous shadows against the high walls. The polished wood of the bench blackened and curled in an instant, the law books catching and peeling open like roasted flowers, their pages turning to black ash in seconds. The heat was immense, a physical presence that pressed on me from all sides, but I felt no pain. I felt only a profound, exultant awe. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was righteous. I backed away slowly toward the heavy oak doors, the inferno roaring before me like a caged animal finally set free. As I reached the entrance, I turned to look one last time at the thick, wired glass window of the main door, the one that led out to the hall. My reflection was a dark, indistinct silhouette against the swirl and chaos of the fire. But as I watched, the image shifted. The heat warped the glass, and my features began to melt and reform into something else. It wasn't my face I saw anymore. It was his. Thomas Reyes. His simple, mechanic's face framed by the holy fire stared back at me from the depths of the inferno. But there was no pity in his eyes this time, no bewilderment. He was smiling, a broad, serene, approving smile. He looked at me, at the purifying fire I had unleashed, and he nodded, a slow, deliberate nod of absolute validation. In that instant, the last 30 years of buried guilt, that shard of glass that had tormented my soul, did not just dissolve, it was forged into a weapon. The ghost of my greatest mistake wasn't haunting me, he was anointing me. He was telling me I had been right all along, not just then, in his case, but now. This act of magnificent destruction was the ultimate justice. This was the absolution I had spent a lifetime seeking, delivered not by a distant God in heaven, but by the victim of my own fallibility. I was not a monster descending into madness. I was a prophet receiving his final fiery revelation. I laughed, a raw, joyful sound that was instantly swallowed by the roar of the flames. The building's alarms began to shriek, a discordant metallic choir celebrating my ascension. I turned my back on the fire and walked out of the courthouse, leaving the screams of the sirens to sing my praises. I was no longer Judge Alistair Finch. I was a cleansing fire, and my work was not yet done.
I walked home through the quiet pre-dawn streets as the sky behind me began to glow a sickening, pulsating orange. The city was stirring. It slumbered disturbed by the first hints of my righteous act. I felt a profound distance from it all, as if I were watching a film about a lesser world. The distant wail of sirens was not a sound of pursuit, but a herald of the new age I had ushered in. When I arrived, the house was just as I had left it, a bastion of perfect order, a temple. And in that temple, the high priestess of the old false religion of empathy was waiting for me. My wife, Martha, stood in the doorway to the study. She had pulled a silk robe over her nightgown. Her face, which I had once considered the very image of gentle kindness, now a mask of anxious weakness. "Alistair, my God, what happened? I saw the glow in the sky. You smell of smoke." Her voice, once a comfort, now grated on me, each word laced with the cloying poison of concern. Her love, her 40 years of unwavering devotion, I saw it now as the ultimate corruption. It was the source of all the gray in the world, the insidious force that stayed the hand of true justice with whispers of mercy and second chances. She was the final, most intimate sickness I had to cure. I moved towards her, and her anxious expression softened into one of relief as she prepared for an embrace. "It's all right, my dear," I said, my voice calm and even. I had never felt more in control. Everything is being made clean now. I pulled her close. She rested her head on my chest, her familiar weight, a strange, final comfort. I could feel her heart beating against my ribs, a fragile, frantic rhythm. In my right hand, which was hidden behind her back, I held the heavy silver letter opener from my desk, its point sharp and precise, an instrument of order. I looked over her shoulder at the reflection in the dark glass of my framed law degree hanging on the wall. I saw my own face, serene, beatific. The eyes were not the eyes of a madman. They were the eyes of a savior. "I'm going to grant you mercy, Martha," I whispered into her hair, breathing in her familiar scent one last time. A perfect, righteous mercy. I embraced her tighter, a final, twisted act of tenderness. And then I plunged the letter opener into her back. I felt the resistance of fabric, then skin, then the clean finality of the blade finding its home between her ribs. A small, shuddering gasp escaped her lips, a puff of warm air against my neck. She stiffened in my arms, a sudden electric rigidity, then went limp. I held her for a long moment as the warmth of her life soaked through my shirt. There was no horror in the act. There was no guilt. There was only the sublime, euphoric peace of a final judgment perfectly rendered. I lowered her gently to the Persian rug, arranging her limbs as if she were merely sleeping. The scent of old books and leather in my study now mingled with the faint smell of smoke that clung to my clothes, and a new coppery tang. I looked around my home, my temple. It was finally clean, and in the perfect, silent order of the room, I stood, a righteous man in a world of my own making. The monster that I had always feared was not only awake, he was sitting on the throne of my soul, and he had convinced me he was God.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. Like and subscribe for more nightmares. Your support keeps the darkness from consuming this channel, so we can face the next terrifying story together. Don't be left in the dark.